I recently found an old journal entry I made that was from mid-2002. It was after I had just finished work on my first Traveling Gringos short, which was around 5 minutes long. This was the longest animation I had ever made up to that time, and I was very proud of it. At the time, I wanted to write down my thoughts and workflow for this project in hopes that it might help someone else out. Since I never released this information before, I figured I would make a video out of it. I'll be reading it in its entirety up next, on today's episode of the Expat Animator. Reading this has definitely been a trip down memory lane for me. I want to make some comments about what I wrote, so I'll be making the occasional comment from time to time. So without further ado, I give you my journal entry from almost 20 years ago. The following is meant to help other independent animators. This is the process I used to create my animated short. Have an idea. Hopefully something you feel passionate about. You may not have the endurance to finish a complicated animation if you don't want to watch it yourself as a fan. Create characters. Make character sheets showing colors and different angles and poses. Think up basic plot. Write script. Create storyboards. Record voices. Backgrounds. I attacked this problem by using digital photos I took using a 3.3 megapixel camera. The 3.3 megapixel digital camera. That was actually my second digital camera ever. My first was a 1 megapixel Olympus that I bought in the late 90s. I then manipulated them using Photoshop Elements. Other backgrounds were created totally in Photoshop Elements. Animate. Rough drawings based on storyboards in blue and red pencils for tracing on a light table. Check flipping. Draw, trace, clean drawings on light table with pencil. Scan drawings. Scan drawings into Apple PowerBook G4 550 MHz using Mac OS 9.2 with a 20 gig internal hard drive and 512 megs of RAM. That Apple PowerBook G4 was my second laptop ever, and probably still to this day one of my favorite computers I've ever bought. And it wasn't even running Mac OS X. I also use a Maxter external 80 gigabyte hard drive running at 7200 RPMs. I actually bought a few of those Maxter 80 gig drives, and that's when I learned that the difference between 5400 RPM and 7200 RPMs, there was a big difference in performance. Scanned in Photoshop Elements, which came with my Canon scanner. Adjust drawings in Photoshop Elements with contrast, brightness, erasers, and align drawings using layers. Save as TIFFs, import into Animation Stand Pro. Looking back on this, I remember using TIFFs because I knew it was the largest file size for an image, but I would have been much better off using JPEGs. Test drawings. Test drawings timing in Animation Stand Pro by exporting black and white drawings as QuickTimes. If timing is good, then coloring each frame by hand in the program is next. Lip syncing. Lip syncing in Animation Stand Pro is next. This worked best for me by importing WAV files that were resaved as WAV files through QuickTime Pro 5. Saving a WAV file out as a WAV file sounds weird, but that's somehow saving it out of QuickTime made it so that the file ran better. For some reason, this was the best possible playback I was able to find. Export. Export final shots as QuickTimes, .mov files, and give them to my editor Scott, who is using a similarly configured Titanium G4 laptop in Mac OS X using Final Cut Pro 3. I remember Scott's same laptop as I had, but he was running OS X, and I was stuck on OS 9 because I was still working on the animation. And I remember being jealous that I couldn't upgrade because I didn't want to have software break on me. More timing, fades, cross dissolves, and other effects are added in this step. When Scott has all the timing correct, he exports to Justin, saving from Final Cut Pro to a QuickTime using these settings. Format: Cinepack 240 to 180, millions of colors. Frames per second, 29.97. These are very good to use in Justin's Pro Tools LE 5.2. I really don't know if these were good settings at the time, but remember, this was before any information was really on the internet, and so we were just kind of doing tests, test after test after test to see what the best quality came out, and this is what we kind of settled on. Music. Music is recorded according to the timing and feelings evoked from the piece. Then sound effects are recorded and added. A final AIFF file is exported and given back to Scott to use as the fully timed soundtrack, which is added in as an audio layer in Final Cut Pro. Any final timing and or necessary changes are made and fixed using any of the aforementioned methods. Final export will be from Final Cut Pro and given to a professional DVD authoring service for eventual mass production. I may be doing this using DVD Studio Pro 1.5 on Mac OS X. We'll see what happens. I never did buy DVD Studio Pro, as I remember it was kind of expensive and hard to learn. And iDVD from Applehood came out, so I ended up using that to make my final DVDs, but I never did take it to a professional DVD authoring service because I was quoted thousands of dollars and just didn't see a way to distribute that many DVDs. So I ended up hand making about 200 DVDs of the final product. This information may not be the easiest or most efficient way of animating, but being that this was my first animation over 4 minutes, it seemed to work good for me. Be aware that problems will arise. Troubleshooting will need to be done. Hair will be pulled and pencils will be thrown. But it all seems to be part of the learning process, which I definitely did a lot of on this project. Hope someone out there finds this somewhat helpful. That was kind of fun remembering what I went through back then. Thanks for taking this trip down memory lane with me. Well, that's it for this week. My name is Patrick Davidson, and this has been another episode of the Expat Animator. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next week.